Good morning from Concord, New Hampshire. It's TeamStrub Day 82, and I'm thrilled to be here at the Boys and Girls Club with Chris Emond. Chris, thank you so much for taking the time this morning.
No problem. It's been great learning about your trip.
Yeah, so much fun. So, again, this is my third Boys and Girls Club of the summer. We're going to hear all about it. So, without further ado, Chris, can you please introduce yourself and just tell us what you do?
Sure. My name is Chris Emond. I'm the Executive Director of the Boys and Girls Clubs now of Central New Hampshire.
Okay.
And I've been here for 15 years in that capacity.
Chris, what is the Boys and Girls Club?
To me, the Boys and Girls Club is three things. It's a safe place for the kids to be able to hang out. It's a place where we provide opportunities for the kids to engage in different activities that they might not have thought about. And finally, it's a place where they're going to find that coach, mentor, buddy, friend, something. Whether it's an adult or a volunteer or a teacher that kind of comes in. And I think that that's critical because we can all look back in our lives and there was always one or two people that were unrelated to you that took an interest and said, you know what, you should go to college, or maybe you ought to enlist in the Army, or you know what, you should take that job. I think that's a good opportunity for you. And those kind of quick 5-minute chats that you have with kids out in the games room are unbelievable because they do actually, kids do get, when they get older, come back and say, you know, when you told me that I ought to think about the Marines, I actually did it. And it's, you don't know until they come back in their full dress Marine uniform. Like, that's amazing. It was just a 5-minute chat, but it changed their lives. So it's kind of critical work that we do, and we work with, here in Concord, with populations with all different backgrounds. Some are fine, affluent, two-parent family, you know, and I would always say that that's not always the norm, or, you know, you have to be a little careful how you phrase that, but then we work with kids that, you know, most people might more associate with a club, some economically disadvantaged kids. We got kids who have some behavioral issues, just kind of syndromes and that kind of thing that you can see that might make it challenging for them to literally to make it through an after-school program in an environment that's unsupported. And we have a wonderful partnership here with Riverbend Community Mental Health. They do wonders here and make sure that kids can be successful here, no matter what their background.
Great. So let's talk about your background a little bit. You've been here 15 years, you told me?
That's right.
And prior to this, you worked at Big Brothers Big Sisters, which has been another big organization. I've had a chance to visit 6 different chapters so far.
That's great.
2 more. So why Boys and Girls Club? What is it about this organization that draws you to it?
Well, again, I was actually the director of Big Brothers Big Sisters for a few years, and I loved that job. It was a much smaller organization, so I had hands-on with basically everything. I worked a lot with the kids directly. What I kind of miss here being the executive director is kids, they kind of know me, but they know me as that guy that's going from office to office. I mean, there I was like the guy, and all the kids would cheer when you walk into the room. Yeah. That's cool. I don't care who you are. That's cool. You know, I think when the kids do that.
Yeah.
But I partnered with the Boys and Girls Club down in Manchester, New Hampshire, back then, and I was always impressed. Wow, you know, they're not just doing mentoring, as I was talking about. There's all this other stuff, food programs. You know, computer labs, they've got teen leadership programs, we've got a kindergarten. There's just so many more options that you can provide and be more kind of like a full service kind of facility for parents, and on top of that, mentoring. But when I came up here, you know, Big Brothers Big Sisters, and you visited 6 of them, you said do a very specific thing where they're matching people, you know, one-on-one. And so we partnered with a mentoring program up here called the Friends Program because I did not want to recreate the wheel. But I definitely wanted to make sure that some of the kids at the Boys and Girls Club could participate in, you know, very traditional type of Big Brother Big Sister matches, and that's worked out well too.
Great. Boys and Girls Club of America, you mentioned right before we turned the camera on, there are a number of things that differentiate your specific club here from maybe some other chapters.
I think so from what I've heard. I know you were going to talk about how we're financed. We are financed kind of uniquely as far as clubs. There's an annual fee, but then we charge a weekly fee. We are essentially licensed child care programs. And I say that because if you visited other clubs, some operate as drop-in centers, and there literally is a 1 annual fee of $5, and they're in for the entire year. So obviously your fundraising mechanism needs to be very strong in order to be able to afford that. As I said, with the demographics in Concord, very evenly kind of spaced out, where you've got some parents that choose to bring their kids to the club that are very well off, and they can afford a fee. They used to say, well, why don't you charge a fee? And then you do have others that can't. So it's a little bit more of a business model where we charge, and then we raise approximately, right now it's about 45% of our budget, and that's what we're able to give away in scholarships. And in no way or circumstance would we ever deny a kid access to the club. And, you know, we hear all the stories and all the scenarios, but at the end of the day, we're like, that kid needs to be at the Boys and Girls Club, so we're going to figure out a way of getting him or her in, period. So you know, when I say we went fee-based, it's been 8 years since we made that transition. We survived through the recession because of it, and we emerged as a much more stable, kind of progressive organization, being able to branch out to other communities. And that just enabled us to serve more kids. But I in particular, but with the board, promised ourselves that fundraising would always be an important component of how our Boys and Girls Clubs is financed. We should never get to a point where it's all fully fee-based, because that's not the mission of the club either, in my opinion.
And you've got a grant writer here as well.
We've got a grant writer, we have a development director, we do a lot of work with individual donors. The one area that we really don't work on is, quite honestly, is government funding. When I came here, we were fairly heavily federally funded, and I was always worried about that. There was one thing I worried about with this job, it was that, because it was a sizable contract. At one point, it made almost 50% of our budget, and I said, you know, if that goes away overnight, this whole organization is not going to collapse, but it's just going to be a shell of its former self. And I worried about that. I never wanted to be at the whim of a politician saying, well, you know, Boys and Girls Club, or we're going to go do something else now. I wanted to raise our own money, whether it's through fees or individuals. And individuals are much more savvy in their giving, but they don't ask me to write 500 reports during the year to tell them how we're doing. They just ask me, they pick up the phone, we'll go out to lunch, or they can walk in through the front door and see for themselves. Government grants don't tend to operate that way. You tend to be a lobbyist, and then you tend to be a reporter of how you're doing.
Sure.
And, you know, it literally costs a lot of infrastructure to do that. The grants that we write are to private foundations that we know, and there were a lot of them in New Hampshire. And same as anything else, you develop relationships with the foundation heads, and the grant writer will write the story and the message and the need that we're trying to portray.
So there's going to be other organizations watching around the country. It sounds like that differentiation of funding services has really been the focus. 15 years on the job.
Yeah,
I mean amongst other things, but
excuse me. Yeah, it's no money, no mission. We've got an individual up here that's a donor and runs Delta Dental, which actually itself is a nonprofit, but he's famous for saying that: no money, no mission. And it's not everything, and it's not the only thing, but if you want to have a good development director, and you want to have a good bookkeeper, and you want to have the very best in child care staff, early development, early childhood educated folks that really understand the stages of the development, how to properly program a curriculum and then implement it in a club, you can't fool yourself. You can't hire